Let's give this a try, okay? So everyone, good morning. I'm here with Barbara Guggenheim. And last time, about 4 weeks ago, Barbara and I had a little difficulty in connecting with the internet. And it looks like we still have a little thing. Neither of us is genius in this world of technology, but good morning, Barbara.
Hi, we'll give it a...
Okay, so I'm going to give them a little background. I know we went over this last time, but for the people that are joining us today and didn't get to see us when we started about 4 weeks ago, I want to give them a little bit of your background, Barbara. So Barbara's a partner in one of America's best-known art advisory firms, Guggenheim Asher Associates. They have offices in New York and Beverly Hills, and Barbara holds a doctorate in art history from Columbia University. She's taught at the college level. She's worked at Sotheby's, headed 2 departments at Christie's, and lectured for years at the Whitney Museum. She's also written commentaries on the art world for many journals, including the New York Observer and the Robb Report. She lectures widely on collecting art in the art market and has been the subject of numerous articles like in the Vanity Fair and Forbes. She's considered the Dean of Art Advisors in the United States. So Barbara's written a wonderful book, which anybody who's interested in art, this is an incredible book. It's called Art World, The New Rules of the Game. It's 1 part instructional guide and 1 part history. And it covers a broad spectrum of subjects, from buying a piece of art at auction, appraising a work of art as an investment, framing a piece, and deciding what to do with a piece if you're no longer in love with it. So Barbara, thank you for joining us this morning.
I think you've covered it about it all.
Okay, yeah. Well, I hope I haven't missed anything. Anyway, so, you know, I've known you for so many years, and I don't think I've ever asked you how you got involved in the world of art, or what inspired you into this career?
Oh, when I was younger and lectured at the Whitney Museum, a woman stopped me and said, "Hey, you're very good. You can really explain this stuff. Could you take me to Soho?" And I said, "Well, if you got a group of women together, I'd be happy to take you." So I started a small company called Art Tours of Manhattan that gave tours artists, studios and galleries and museums. And after a few years, she bought an apartment in New York. She said, "Would you help me buy some paintings for my apartment?" And it just blossomed from there. So one handed it off to the other.
Great. So are you a native of New York, or?
I went to school in New York at Columbia, and I stayed for about 20 years before I moved to LA. But it's interesting because everybody always says you're the dean of art advisors, but art advisory services are actually very old. Mary Cassatt was an art advisor. Rich people would Americans would send her to Paris to buy for them. So it goes back. Or John Raywald, who wrote the definitive book on Impressionism, acted as an advisor to many of the collectors in the 1950s, after World War II.
I wasn't aware of that. That's fascinating. So, Barbara, tell us, what does an art advisor do? What services do you provide?
Well, in the beginning, a painting is considered wrong until it's proven to be right. So the very first thing is to make sure that the painting is authentic. Obviously, if it comes from its primary dealer, you don't have anything to worry about. And if it's gone from the studio to the dealer, you're fine. But anytime it's been out in the world and is what's called the secondary market, you have to start to ask questions. You have to ask questions about its authenticity. You have to ask questions about its condition. You have to ask questions about its provenance, where it's been. For example, if it's from the 1920s and there's no provenance until 1966, you have to worry that it was a Nazi painting. So an advisor vets all of those things. They also vet if you're paying the right price for the object.
Right.
And the object you should be buying, considering you have X amount of money per year to spend. Is this the best thing I can do with my money? So that's true on the primary market or the secondary market.
Right.
And the same thing is true because at auction, even it's not that they do it on purpose, but they have 500, 1,000 lots to catalog for every sale. They don't have time to take everything out of the frame, make sure every work on paper is really a work on paper that hasn't been stained or doesn't have a problem or hasn't been ripped, or, you know, and they're working for the seller and themselves. They're not working for you, the buyer. An art advisor works for and exclusively fiduciary of the buyer.
So, Barbara, if you bought a work at auction and under the assumption that this was an important work, it's what it is represented to be, and then, you know, a year or two later, you find out you have it reappraised or something, and you found out it wasn't, do you have any recourse?
You have 5 years.
You do?
For an auction, yeah. And
okay.
But it's interesting because, for example, we ran into a situation where we were looking at a Dubuffet, and you know, they're all kind of spaghetti, like red, white, blue. And the provenance said it was on the cover of a certain book. And we got the book, we got out a loop, and we looked at it, we looked at it, we looked at it, and it looked absolutely identical. And as we put the book down, my partner, Abigail Asher, said, hang on, the top right looks a little funny. It's missing a stroke. And we later learned that a framer in Florida who kept taking paintings from this very good collector who was listed in the provenance would forge the painting, switch them.
Oh my God.
And send them to New York, and they'd be put at auction with the right provenance and the right everything. So the art market's absolutely fraught with crazy things like that. And anybody who enters it, especially in the beginning, has to have somebody who vets for you and protects your interests.
Right. So if you were to buy at auction, can you explain a little bit, Barbara, how the auction process works and how you go about? I mean, there's so much available at auction. I know when I go through the catalogs, I really need somebody to advise me because it's very confusing. I see several things that I like, but I don't know if it's right for me or my collection. So how does the auction process work?
Well, I think that it's a wealth of material, just as you said, and you have to winnow it down almost for yourself. But you have to be aware, first of all, that you're looking at little tiny photographs and not looking at the work itself. So the first thing I think I would do is look at the measurements and take a piece of paper or cardboard and make a template as the size it really is. So
that's a great suggestion.
For example, I had a friend who was a famous model, and she bought a Warhol camouflage painting from a Transparency in those days, and she couldn't wait for it to come. And when it came, she thought it was 11 by 9. It was 20 feet long.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, you know, you have to be really careful about the size of...
Well, she got a lot of artwork for her money then.
And today, especially with COVID, the auctions aren't even taking... for example, there's a sale of outdoor sculpture. Usually they would put everything in one park. You could go to the park, walk around and look. And now the things aren't even leaving the people's homes. They're So you look at the list. It's called Dream Big at Christie's. You pick what you want. You pay Christie's, and then you have 5 days to go and look at it in the person's yard.
Wow.
Or we sold one for a client where the person said, it's COVID, I don't want to fly to, it was in Florida. So he said, I'll pay for it to be sent to New York where I can see it. And he bought it. So but for our clients, even if it's sight unseen to them, our job is to go and look.
Right. And your clients are that have worked with you, they obviously trust you and trust your judgment. And, you know, I mean, you have a very discerning eye. It's, I'd look at something very differently than you would.
Well, so. I think also if it's a valuable piece, you want to have an independent conservation report. Because again, the reports that the auction house gives sort of don't go into it in gravity.
Indeed. Okay.
Because they're the seller. They want to lighten up.
Right.
So you need somebody, and every painting's different. For example, if an old master painting, well, if you're 300 years old, you've had a lot of scratches. But if a painting is an Ellsworth Kelly or an Agnes Martin and it has one scratch, you might not want to buy it.
Right.
Because it's supposed to be in perfect condition.
Right.
So the rules for one artist are very different from the rules for another.
Yes, I see.
And each artist has its own problem and its own set of rules. And if you're not familiar with those rules, you really need someone who is.
Right. So tastes and styles change over a period of time. So over the past few decades, how have you seen art change and evolve and the tastes in art? I mean, I know we've gone through so many periods.
Well, exactly. You see it every day in interior design. What you might have thought of as being important in the 80s is now out of fashion.
Right.
If we go back to the 50s, I like to think of it after World War II. A lot of American soldiers came back from the European theater with a taste for things French.
Right.
French twist. And you had French poodles, and you had fondue. And people who lived on Fifth Avenue and Park Avenue did their apartments with Louis furniture, if they had money, Impressionist paintings with gold frames, and puddling drapery.
Right.
And then came the 80s, and that kind of changed. A lot of people collected chintz, the Mario Bawada style.
Right.
English wood furniture became more popular, and 19th century academic paintings. If you looked at apartments in magazines like Caroline Rome, for example,
Yes.
had a beautiful apartment in that style, in that time. And today, Google boys and people, young people, a street scene in rural France doesn't mean anything to them. So a painting doesn't. Whereas a Cause or a
Basquiat or somebody, yes, has a much younger audience.
And furniture too. What started out as modern furniture, and then they look back for the real inspiration. So you have Jean-Michel Franck, and you had the modern
Right.
furniture, Art Deco and modern furniture from the 40s, then the mid-century furniture in America. I like to say my entire apartment is decorated in furniture the year I was born. But I can describe to you one wonderful moment when we were brought up in a very colonial American home, period colonial American home.
Right.
at American colonial furniture.
Uh-huh.
And one day my mother sent us away to relatives for a week. And when we came back, the house became mid-century modern. She had Nelson, she had all kinds of blonde furniture. And it was just shocking. How
Right.
changed. She was wearing George Jensen jewelry.
Jewelry, sure.
Suddenly, overnight, she became a mid-century
Yeah, it
modern.
was a very exciting period for design.
Yes, with all the case study houses here
Yes, yes.
in Los Angeles, and then Lautner and so forth.
Right. So is there a dominant movement today in art like in the past we had modernism, Dadaism, etc.? Is there anything today that we can identify this era with?
I think it's tough. It's tough. Remember, there was abstract expressionism, then there was minimal, the pop art, and today it's like anything goes.
It's all over the place.
It, if there are dominant themes, it's that there's somewhere deep inside uh, impact statement that's being made, which might refer to street art, it might refer to Black Lives Matter, it might refer to women's power, so that you have suddenly, instead of people looking at young artists and thinking they're going to buy a young artist for 20,000, it's going to be worth 200 or 2 million. They're looking at women who are overlooked, like Asawa or Frankenthaler or Joan Mitchell, and their prices have suddenly started to sky. Black artists from the past and contemporary Black artists, their prices have started. So people are looking for opportunity in a different place than they were looking for opportunity
Before, yes.
years ago.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I remember, I think a couple years ago, I was at the Biennale in Venice, and the American Pavilion was an exhibition by Mark Bradford. And it was very edgy and very an exciting installation. So he probably wouldn't have had that opportunity some decades ago,
Yeah, and now you
being
can,
a Black artist.
yes, and now there's a waiting list for his work,
Right.
and he had a big show at the Hirshhorn, and he's just, I would say he's considered one of, you remembered well, because he's considered one of the best artists working today
Right.
here in Los Angeles.
So do you go to the Venice Biennale? What shows do you travel to here in this country and abroad? Are there any of your ones that are your favorites?
Well, now online, it's a lot easier. You go.
Right. I guess that's the only way you can do it.
The other day in the Bare Facts, which is a newsletter that comes out, someone
Right.
he was basically saying, what is it that the galleries are doing? It's kind of like this free service for nobody who's really going, and yet 98% of the clientele are in the Hamptons. So everyone's opened in the Hamptons. All the galleries have opened, Sotheby's, Christie's, Phillips have opened, because I think people are going to be hunkered down for the duration. So they're trying to get some live action going.
Well, you know, all the we were talking just a bit ago about the auctions and how the auctions today are virtual, and so are a lot of. I know that, you know, especially in the first few months of being stuck at home, I spent a lot of time going through museums and viewing the collections online, because they had started to put things online. And I know that Sotheby's had sent me an email one day, and it listed 5 museums in New York. 2 or 3 of them I had never even heard of. And I viewed the collections, and, you know, I went through the Whitney and also through MoMA, and it was very exciting to be able to sit there and go through the collections. Some of them I was familiar with and some I wasn't.
Well,
So,
that's really true.
so
Um,
I think that's something that people can do today. You want to visit the Met, you want to visit um, MoCA in Los Angeles or the Temporary Contemporary. You can go online and see these things.
I
So,
and they'll go in your memory bank so that when you finally do get to see them, you're pre-programmed.
right.
And it will mean more to you. I think you're absolutely right. But by the same token, like the Marciano Museum has closed, and there are other closures in Los Angeles and in other cities because they can't afford to stay. Nonprofit organizations are having a tough.
Right. Now, I just read that that Gagosian is taking over the Marciano space.
Oh, I didn't read that, but I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah, that would be nice because it's an
Yeah.
incredible building. It's incredible space for art. So, um, so
I,
somebody starting out, a young person.
there's a war between three or four of the big galleries as
Oh,
as to who's going to actually dominate the scene because Gagosian has no heirs. So
ah,
unless he uh, identifies someone to take over his business, you've got Zwerner, you have Hauser and Wirth, you have a really big competition between the top galleries now.
well, we'll see how the war ends in a few
Yeah.
months, I guess. So a young person starting out today, what would be your advice for them? And I just noticed somebody, this is something I wanted to ask you, and a couple people that are watching have asked, what do you recommend for a young person who wants to start collecting?
There are some really, first, especially in Los Angeles. Don't forget, in LA, you can get a street front or you can get a factory for a lot less than you can in New York. So I think the action's in LA. So like Night Gallery, Lead Apron, there are many young gallerists who are so professional that they get their artists collected, bought by serious collectors.
Uh-huh.
And I think that LA is the place to look at contemporary art today. So I would make a list of all the galleries that are downtown, and a lot of them are east near Highland. And I would absolutely keep looking online and seeing what you like. I think there's a return to uh, realistic imagery. And if it
Huh.
isn't photographic,
Right.
it's there certainly is some realism within.
So I've been fortunate enough to work with you on a project, and you sort of introduced me into the world of photography. So we did a corporate installation with a very interesting collection of photographs, and we're still working on it. So I've learned a lot from you with photography, but also, um, I look at something one way because I'm a designer, and you're an advisor and a curator, and you see things a little differently. And I know several times you said, "Oh, this should go here and here," and I think, is she out of her mind? And then I see when it's all assembled, how you've put it together and the impact that it makes and how it affects the continuity of the work. And so it's really a learning experience to work with somebody who's knowledgeable in the art world.
Oh, I think it's easier the other way around. I like working with you because you have a point of view, and my job is to be your handmaiden and continue that point of view when it comes. Especially with photography, especially with corporate work, you want it to be provocative for the workers so that there's a thinking element to every work that's collected, that it doesn't just become wallpaper.
Right.
and uh, and in people's homes, I really encourage them to move things around every
Right.
year, 2 years, just so they see things differently, and they get a chance to view
Yeah,
them.
there's a lot of times something will be hung somewhere and you're so used to passing by it, you don't even pay attention. I tell my clients the same thing when it comes to furnishings and accessories. Move things around, recreate the space. It's exciting. It gives new vitality to these pieces.
I,
So also, one of the things in working with you, I've learned a lot about lighting for art. And I think that's a very important, if we can just touch on that for a second, because there's many different ways to light a piece of art. You know, like it's different lighting in an oil or an acrylic than it is a work on paper that might have a lens on it that reflects light. So I know on one of the projects we're working on, I've been working with you on where things are going and how we incorporate with the architect lighting, maybe a framing projector. So how do you feel about framing projectors and highlighting
the
paintings?
the only thing I'm really against is the scallop. There's those
Right.
lights that give
Of a
the
downlight that creates a, right.
that create the scallop. I want to shoot the person who does that. I think that's kind of in the past, though. I think people are getting more sophisticated, and
Right.
that used to be called wall washers or something,
Right.
and they were. Now, I think it depends on the period of the work, and it depends on the mood of the collector. I can easily see in a cozy study someone using picture lights that hang over the painting, and even if it's a modern painting,
Right.
they give certain intimacy to the work.
Well, you
Whereas,
just did that with the Basquiat
yes,
that um,
yeah,
yes.
in, in a public space, perhaps the wall washers are better. And I love projectors.
Uh-huh.
Um, there's a special work in a special place that what I call it the money shot.
Right.
It, if somebody wants to pronounce that object, I'm all for it.
Mm. Barbara, you've lectured for years at the Whitney Museum. So I haven't been fortunate enough to attend one of your lectures. What do you speak on current exhibitions? What do you talk about at your Whitney lectures?
Oh, I lecture all over the place now, and on how to collect, but also whatever's up in the museums. And I love it because it forces me to really learn the material, and much of which comes from private collections that like you said, that I wouldn't have seen before had it not been for the show. So it forces an education for me, and my job is to make it easily, to explain it easily to, I always say, to beer drinkers in Brooklyn, just to make it just digestible to anyone who happens to come by, not just the experts and collectors.
Right. Um, if you were to buy something for yourself personally today and you just thought, I want a painting, what would you gravitate towards? Is it hard for you to make a decision for yourself? I mean, you see so much.
Really hard, really hard. I see a lot and I love a lot. So, this morning, actually, I was thinking about plein air painting, which was American Impressionism done in California.
Right,
And I was thinking it had its heyday. You remember the lupines and poppy paintings,
right,
and then the time when they were really hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then the market dropped out. Same thing for American Impressionism. And I keep asking myself, will these markets come back?
right,
Will William Merritt Chases, will the Child Hassams, will the great artists of America of the late 19th century? And, and maybe that's where one should be looking for undervalued material.
right.
beautiful anyway.
So has this era of COVID changed the art market much?
Oh, I think forever.
Yeah,
I think there'll be much more buying online. If you know what you're doing and you've seen, as you say, enough Mark Bradfords,
right.
then one comes up online. If you get the condition report or if you have an advisor, then you can feel comfortable going ahead. But but it's it's tricky. There's a new site where the man has an auction of one thing a week. It's just changed dramatically.
Wow.
And I think the auction houses are realizing it, and dealers are realizing they don't need brick and mortar for the same
Right,
purpose.
exactly.
They,
I
they,
think it's the same in a lot of prep. It's the same in my business too. Other than sitting in a chair to find out if it's comfortable, we can do everything pretty much online today, including designing the structures architecturally and seeing everything online. So we are going into a new era.
well, you also know what's right.
Right.
So
Well, like you do, you know what's right. And that's
yeah, you need to work with somebody who knows what's right.
so. Anyway, there's so many things I'd love to discuss with you, more things, and unfortunately, we have limited time. Um, is there anything else you'd like to add to this? I see so many comments here coming
Well,
across the screen.
I I think that the timing, the COVID timing, is right for people who are looking at their homes and
Right.
redoing homes
Yes.
and saying, oh, this chair needs to be refurbished, or really, I need a new chair. Or they have new respect for their homes because they're spending more time in
Right.
there. And so I think they are looking at their walls, and I think they are looking at their tables and chairs and furniture in a way perhaps that they didn't before. And I think that's thrilling.
It is. I also love when a client is as interested in how the art is going to impact the room as just furnishings. Because for me, the most exciting thing is working with an interesting art collection and designing around that. When you have really some exciting paintings or sculpture in a room, it's always great to work with pieces like that and showcase them. So,
It was,
and hopefully people, I know that everybody seems to be busy because people are staying home, they're redoing their spaces, and they realize how important their sanctuaries are to them today.
yeah, I mean, I better learn to cook. I have to, if I'm spending time in my house, all of these things that most of us haven't thought about in a long
Yeah,
time are important. Even your
yeah.
book.
Well, anyway, Barbara, thank you so much for visiting today. I know everybody loved listening to you, and I'm glad we finally made it. I hope this was successful and records successfully. So we had a rough start, but it ended up great.
Mark,
So,
you're a really good interlocutor. You should think about doing it more and more often and more as a profession. You're really good at it.
thank you, Barbara. You're sweet. Have a
Okay,
great weekend, and
you
I'll
too.
talk to you soon.
See you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.